Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we are learning how to guard our minds against all of the manipulations that are present in the 21st century media landscape, as well as, hopefully, how to think better, think well about the world in which we live. There's a lot to deal with out there in today's digital world, and we need to be on guard and understand how to think in ways that align with truth and align with reality so that we can navigate the treacherous landscape that we have to deal with every day. We are currently focusing on the deterioration of the education system in the United States and how the institutions of academia have fallen into a state of essentially functional dysfunction. Last week, we took a look at a man named John Dewey and a small snapshot of his ideas about what education should be geared towards and focused on. Tonight, we are going to jump forward in time a bit to examine the state of education and establish where we are at now, relatively speaking. And this is so that we can use data and evidence to look back into the past to see if the designers of our system were able to meet their goals and achieve the kinds of change that they were after. We'll look at the designers in later videos. We've already looked at a few in the early videos of this channel, John Dewey being one of them. And as I've said before, I find that the education component of our current world to be one of the more crucial and exploited areas of life, particularly when it comes to affecting the minds of any generation. I believe that it's helpful to consider things in this realm from a sort of battle tactic perspective. If one side is seeking to control and dominate the other, an effective way to do that is to gain favor from those who would otherwise view them as being in direct opposition to what they hold good and to be true. It's often far too difficult to sway the section of the population who has grown up within a way of life or holds a certain worldview, at least enough to gain any kind of tactical advantage in the ideological war that wages every day. However, if there is a way to infiltrate the younger generations and teach them to view the world in ways that align with your side's interests and ideas, then, in time, there will be no more need to fight, as the metaphorical or ideological ground will be taken from within the culture. This is a classic tactic of authoritarian regimes, and it has been used to great effect in places like Germany of the 1920s and 30s, as well as China through much of the 20th century and right up into today. What I wish to show through this exploration of the education system is that we have been lulled into a state of extreme vulnerability and weakness when it comes to our ability to think and reason well. Our schools have failed us, and that is not only a personal security issue. At the scales to which the damage has been done, we have a national security issue on our hands, and one that threatens all that has made America the freest, most prosperous nation in the history of humanity. So, where did we come from, and where are we going? American education has been demonstrably on the decline since the 1960s, yet there are factors present that cause this fact to be obfuscated, and as such, there is not much mentioned regarding the ways in which we have been failing in this area of society. In his book, Inside American Education, The Decline, Deception, and Dogmas, the Professor Thomas Sowell takes a serious and rigorous look at the ways in which our system of education has been steadily deteriorating over decades. Now, this book was published in the early 1990s, yet the facts and conclusions drawn from the data are just as appropriate today as they were then. What's more is that we have not reversed course in the way that we run our system of education in America, and as such, the things that are revealed in Professor Sowell's book have only gotten worse since its release. Being an economist, Sol's take has a focus on the impact that our failing schools have on the economic health of our country with respect to being able to compete on the world stage. While that is a serious focus point, he maintains the kind of urgency and exposes issues that will appropriately serve our endeavors and investigations here with Minds on Guard. The fact that education can and does have such an effect on the economic viability of a nation speaks to just how important this area of life is. In his preface to the book, Sol writes, "Much has been said about how our young people do not meet the academic standards of their peers in other countries with which we compete economically. While this is both true and important, their academic deficiencies are only half the story. All across this country, the school curriculum has been invaded by psychological conditioning programs which not only take up time sorely needed for intellectual development, but also promote an emotionalized and anti-intellectual way of responding to the challenges facing every individual and every society. Worst of all, the psychotherapeutic curriculum systematically undermines the parent-child relationship and the shared values which make a society possible." Since the 1960s, average scores of American students taking college aptitude tests like the SAT and the ACT have been on a steady decline. This trend is also seen when looking at the scores of the Iowa Test for Educational Development, which deal with students in the primary and secondary education levels. In 1991, for example, only 11% of 8th grade students in California's public schools could solve 7th grade math problems. Interestingly, alongside this decline in testing and aptitude, we have seen a steady rise in the grade point average of the nation. The percentages of C's to A's with respect to classroom performance has become inverted since the 1960s. Where C's were once a more dominant mark, we now see more A's being given in the high school levels. The trend is the same at the collegiate level as well. So how could this relationship occur? If our nation's students have been consistently testing below the scores of the previous generations, then why do we see grade point averages rising at the same time? Sol writes, "These two trends, grade inflation and declining test scores, are by no means unconnected. Without the systematic deception of parents and the public by rising grades, it is highly unlikely that the decline in performance could have continued so long." So the suggestion here is that in order to obfuscate the fact that students have been falling behind and not achieving the educational successes of the previous generations, their quarterly grades have been used as a smokescreen so as to not raise suspicion among parents to the fact that the system is actually broken. There are many issues with this, one of them being the outsourcing of responsibility of a parent to play an integral role in raising their child, particularly educating their child. As we will see, this outcome has been part of the design of the destruction of American minds. As we have discussed on this channel before, one of the major contributing factors to the real decline in the performance of students in American schools is revealed when asked how the students feel about their understanding or performance in various subjects. This appeal to emotion signals the inner perception of a person with respect to how they understand the truth of their environment. To illustrate this point, a study was conducted between 13-year-old students from both America and Korea. The Korean students ranked first in the world in their understanding of mathematics, while American students ranked last. When asked how the students felt that they performed on the tests, 23% of Korean students said that they felt good at mathematics, while on the American side, 68% gave the same answer. Sowell states, with respect to this study, the American educational dogma that students should, quote, feel good about themselves was a success in its own terms, though not in any other terms. A related educational dogma is that learning must be enjoyable to be effective. This phenomenon is not just limited to the fields of mathematics. All areas like science, history, and geography show similar results in decline in American students, along with the previously mentioned college test scores. Again from Sowell, even these data do not capture the full story of educational disaster in American public schools. Members of the educational establishment often try to downplay such evidence by dismissing the importance of mere facts acquired by rote memory. Unfortunately, as we turn from simple knowledge to more complex abilities in reasoning, the full debacle of American education becomes even more painfully clear. An international study of 13-year-olds showed that American youngsters fell further and further behind the more they were required to think. What these studies in Sowell's research reveal is that despite an ability of American students to memorize and regurgitate facts, the serious problems and differentiations between American students and the international ones become clear when more complex analytical processes must be used in order to arrive at correct and accurate understanding of any topic or subject. And it's not just in the younger ages that this has been seen. Professor Diane Ravitch, a scholar specializing in the study of American education, reports that professors complain about students who arrive at college with strong convictions, but not enough knowledge to argue persuasively for their beliefs. As Professor Ravitch concludes, having opinions without knowledge is not of much value. Not knowing the difference between them is a positive indicator of ignorance. In short, Sowell says, it's not just merely that Johnny can't read, or even that Johnny can't think. Johnny doesn't know what thinking is, because thinking is so often confused with feeling in many public schools. This absence of deeper thought processes within American students is really quite chilling to me. It reveals a breakdown in what is valued in society with respect to how we're able to process information and come to conclusions that align with reality. I have suffered from this problem where my own cognitive capacity for making deeper connections has been seriously stunted. I resonate with these statements from Sowell in that I have confused what actual thinking is and replaced the act with a feelings-based intuitive response to my environment. The phrase, "I feel," is often used by American students to introduce a conclusion rather than say, "I think" or "I know," much less "I conclude." Unfortunately, "I feel" is often the most accurate term and is regarded as sufficient by many teachers as well as students. The net result, as in mathematics, is that many students are confident incompetence, whether discussing social issues, world events, or other subjects. The emphasis is on having students express opinions on issues and not having those opinions taken seriously, enhancing self-esteem, regardless of whether there is anything behind them. To me, this kind of thing leads to serious lapses in sound reasoning and exacerbates any and all manner of emotional dysfunction in a person, specifically their narcissistic traits. When our cognitive capacities are judged based on the feelings that we have as reactions to information, then we are no longer living within objective reality. This sets the stage for all manner of manipulation from outside forces and postmodern destruction of truth and meaning. The rot has set in, and we are in serious trouble. We see the effects all around us in the breakdown of relationships and familial structures and moral systems with connections to truth and reality. It's time we begin taking this hijacking of thinking seriously. And until next time, stay diligent, stay vigilant, and keep your minds on guard.